So I'm trying to set my screen. We'll just go with that anyway. So yeah, it's great to be with you all this morning, and a bit different for me to be the one that's giving a talk. But yeah, some reflections really about what's been happening since the start of lockdown, really. And if I ask you to cast your mind back, at the start of lockdown, Matt presented us with a two-part series, and it was called Stop, Rest and Reset. And at the start, everything came to an abrupt stop, didn't it? Schools were shut. Lots of people weren't able to go to work, and the church building was shut. And Matt said that it was an opportunity to be liberated by God and with God, to be set free, which was the absolute opposite of lockdown, that we weren't free to go out, but that we could be free with God, or be freed by God. So there was this restriction and confinement by the world, but spiritually it was an opportunity to be free. And I remember sending a message out in the Connect group, and I said God was not subject to lockdown rules. Those lockdown rules did not apply to God. He was still able to come and visit my house, and he was still able to come and visit your house. And God was able to hold my hand, which with the lockdown rules, as a person who lives by myself, I wasn't able to go out and meet anybody. I couldn't hold anybody's hand. I couldn't give anybody a hug. But God was not subject to those rules. Contact with God was not restricted. So everything had come to an abrupt stop. And then Matt led us to a passage in Matthew 11, particularly verse 27. And this is the rest part. We had stop, and then we moved to rest. Come to me, and I will give you rest, is what Jesus says in Matthew 11. And I spent a little time pondering on this afterwards, and I used the Living Bible, and I tried to bring it not just up to date as in the 21st century, but right up to date as in March 2020, coronavirus and lockdown. And it was the Living Bible that really sort of helped me with this. And I'm just going to read it to you. And I've just changed one of the words, and you'll see why in a minute. Come to me, and I will give you rest. All of you who work so hard with a heavy timetable. Stick to my timetable. It fits perfectly. And let me teach you. For I am gentle and humble, and you will find rest for your souls. For I only give light burdens. And at that time, at the start of lockdown, things did feel particularly heavy. They didn't feel very light. And my timetable, being an NHS key worker, was even busier than it normally was. It hadn't really sort of pulled back at all. One thing I was grateful for was that the commute time was reduced. I was managing to get into work really quickly, and there was no problem in finding a parking space. And then a few weeks went by, and I was actually then able to work from home. And so my commute was from the lounge downstairs, or from the dining room, having had my breakfast. I would come upstairs into this study, and I would work from home. So I gained some time in not having to commute into work. And so this passage really spoke to me about it saying, follow my timetable. And there were all these people around me that were homeschooling their children. And God said to me, he said, I am your good father. He is my father. And he said to me, I want to homeschool you. I want to homeschool you. It was an amazing sort of affirmation, I suppose, that I was his daughter, that he was interested in me. He had my best interests at heart. He wanted to grow me. And this about homeschooling. And I was sure that it wasn't going to be lessons in geography or history or biology. It may have been lessons, say, in compassion or kindness. Was I going to learn humility, gentleness, or to learn more patience? It was a really sort of special time, this dad and daughter bond. And I don't know whether Linda can just pop up the picture. So there's a picture coming up of a dad and a daughter, and I don't know who this dad is or this daughter is, but I think as you look at this picture, what you can see is that the dad is interested in his daughter. He is spending time, they're both spending time together. There's a certain amount of closeness. There's a love and a comfort. And that was what I felt. So that was great in that sort of resting phase of knowing that God was my good father and that I was his beloved daughter. But that second part of that sermon series, we had stop, rest, and then it came to the reset. And you could say reset meant reboot or refocus or reimagine. There's been a lot of talk about what is going to be the new normal. And you know, nothing has felt normal. Absolutely nothing has felt normal. And this kind of new normal is a rather baffling sort of phrase. And maybe reset, I was thinking, yeah, reset is like pressing a button. You press the button and everything is reset. But as I started to think about it, and as days went past, I decided it's certainly not that simple. It's actually very complicated. It's very painful. I found it a very painful process. And I've likened it to if you break your arm. Now, I've never broken my arm, but there are a few people recently that have broken their arm. So I'm likening the reset to if you break your arm. And your arm then has to be reset in plaster. It has to be immobilized. It has to be restricted in order for it to heal. And if you're right-handed and you break your right arm and it's immobilized, you suddenly have to do things with your left arm. Now, typing isn't so bad, but try writing with your left hand if you're not left-handed, or trying to cook, or so it's very, very difficult. And I've got a friend, Lucy, and she's a teacher. And in February half term, she went horse riding with her daughter and she fell off the horse and she broke her arm up here. It was very painful, very, very painful. I went to visit her and she said, like, this is an absolute nightmare. She was trying to do things with her other arm. And I know that Lydia, are you on here? You broke your arm fairly recently, and even more recently I heard that Sandy Knox, she had a tumble and she's broken her arm. So in this reset, I don't think it's as simple as pressing a button. I think it's quite a painful process, and I got to the point of being completely stuck. So a bit like Irena, I was completely stuck, and when Irena was talking last week, I was struggling for the word, but I realised the word is, for me, was paralysed. I was absolutely paralysed, just not able to move forward. I knew that I couldn't move back. We can't go backwards. And I sat with that for a while, just being stuck, not really knowing what to do, trying to function. And I realised that there's a certain amount of loss to process. There are things that lockdown has meant we have lost out on. And I know some of that for me is tied up with work in the NHS and how things have had to change very quickly. And moving forward, things are going to be, I think, quite different for me as I work. One of the things I've had to work through, so this coming week I should have been flying out to Canada to visit my sister and my brother-in-law and my 2 nieces. And that's been very hard to know that that is not going to happen, and to not know when I'm going to be able to go and see them again. So in acknowledging those losses, and there were tears, and I started to feel less stuck, and I messaged Matt and had a chat with Matt and found that actually there were other people that were stuck, and it wasn't just me. And it's very helpful to kind of share in that experience, and I'm very grateful for Irena last week, how she shared. That was very, very helpful. Now, often God will drop a song into my mind that is very helpful. Often these, songs are based on scripture. So there's a song called Raise a Hallelujah, and it's from Bethel Music, and the chorus in there, and in fact I'm going to attempt to just sing it out, because that's the best way of explaining it to you. So if you're in my Connect group, this is not new to you. You sometimes get a burst of song from me, sometimes my crazy messages, but yeah, it goes, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and gonna hear my praises roar. And it reminded me of a picture that Matt used. And I'm sure he used it at Melody's dedication. And Linda, if you could pop that picture on of a lion looking in a mirror. And what he sees is this kitten, I'm going to say kitten. And although I am a lion, I have God's power inside of me. When I was looking at myself, I wasn't seeing that I was a strong lion with God's power inside of me. I felt weak as a kitten. But God reminded me and strengthened me. And so I wanted to let my praises roar, which is why I'm talking to you today. Now, I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back again to the start of the year, so 2020, and give me a wave if you went on Jay's double-decker bus. Yeah, who went on Jay's double-decker bus to a big meeting at the start of the year? Yeah, was that amazing? We all gathered together. There were a couple of thousand of us, I think, if I remember rightly. And it seems now quite strange to even consider a big group of people like that. But that kicked off the start of our year, and it was a Love Black Country event. But our focus at church for this year of 2020 was grow and grow together. And in January, we had a church meeting, and it was called Grow Together. And just ahead of that, I wrote a prayer that was sent out, and I encouraged everybody to pray this prayer over themselves in preparation, in thinking about how we were going to grow together in 2020. And so I'm going to pray that over us now before we move on to a passage from Isaiah 54. But I'm just going to pray this prayer because it's as relevant today as it was back in January. I'm not sure whether we've got that on the screen, Linda. I will just pray it out from memory. So it's personal. So if you can imagine that it's you saying that out to God as we reach out to God. Talk to me, God. Shout. Whisper. Nudge me. Hug me. Help me listen and grow. Amen. So that prayer is just as relevant today as it was in January. And I usually wake up to a radio alarm, and I have it set to UCB2, United Christian Broadcasts. And there was a verse read out on there, which was towards the end of Isaiah 54. And that was why I read Isaiah 54. And it's always good to sort of read the whole passage, not just to read the individual verse. And so I found myself reading Isaiah 54 and thinking, what is it you want to say, God? And so I'm going to read it out, and I'd ask you to listen out for the nudge. Okay, so I prayed for God to nudge me, and I want you to listen out for the nudge that comes up fairly early in the passage, or some people might recognize it as a challenge. And also I prayed for God to hug me, and in this passage there's a hug, so look out for the hug or for the comfort from God. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. So this is Isaiah 54. Sing, O barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labour. Because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen the cords, strengthen your stakes. For you will spread out to the right and to the left. Your descendants will dispossess nations and settle in their desolate cities. Do not be afraid. You will not suffer shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will not forget the shame. You will forget the shame of your youth, and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. For your Maker is your husband, and the Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. The Lord will call you back as if you were a wife deserted and distressed in spirit, a wife who married young only to be rejected. For a brief moment I abandoned you, but with deep compassion I will bring you back. In a surge of anger I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting kindness I will have compassion on you. To me this is like the days of Noah, when I swore that the waters of Noah would never again cover the earth. So now I have sworn not to be angry with you, never to rebuke you again. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. I'll leave it there and bring some reflections to you. So first of all, I had to get past the first verse. And to see that it wasn't literal or personal. Not that that was easy, because I haven't had any children. And I have been married, and I'm no longer married. And so that first verse was actually very painful to read. But I don't think it's literal. And I wondered why God was pointing this passage out to me. Now, if we look at verse 5, it says, for your Maker is your husband. God is our husband. So if you have a husband, you have a wife, husband and a wife, and they're in a relationship together. There is a commitment. And sometimes the church is likened to being the bride, and God is called the bridegroom. And there is a commitment between the two. So, thinking about relationships and commitments, and they take time and effort. And I felt the question that God was asking of me, and maybe of the wider church, is who have we partnered with? Who have we partnered with? Who or what takes our time, our affection, our money? So I've dotted a few things down that may be relevant to me, may be relevant to you. You may want to have a think about it. So what is it that takes our time, our affection, maybe takes our money? So first of all, I wrote down job. Your job, my job. You go out to work to earn money. But then you've got not the opposite, but sort of thinking about consumerism and spending money. Is that what takes up our time? I've written down sport. Sport sometimes takes up a lot of people's time, whether that's watching sport, which can be enjoyable. Sometimes it's playing sport. But has it become an obsession? I've written down TV, social media. I've even written down family, which is certainly not a bad thing, to be committed to your family, to invest time and money in your family. But what I thought was interesting is during lockdown, quite a lot of those things have been stripped away. Some people haven't been able to go out to work as they normally would, haven't been able to work at all, haven't been able to earn any money. And only essential shops have been open, haven't been able to go out and spend money, although we have got the internet. We've perhaps become even more reliant on that now and on social media. But sport fixtures were cancelled. And even they said that the filming of the soaps on TV, the schedule was going to be interrupted. And if that's your thing, that may have been a big groan on your part of like, oh, my TV program is not going to be on as usual. I think the lesson here is that some things are temporary and they're not eternal. And I felt God was saying to put our trust in things that are solid, not in things that are shifting. As we've seen with lockdown, things can so easily be taken away. And if we're relying on those, it feels as if the rug has been pulled out from under us. Now, did you spot God's hug in that passage, God's comfort? Because it comes in verse 10. God's unfailing love will not be shaken. There's one of many promises of God to us. And I've written here, again, just bringing it right up to date, May 2020. Society may be shaken and all normality be removed. But God says, my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my peace be removed. Now, hands up if you have a rainbow picture in your window. Who's got a rainbow picture? Oh yes, lots of hands going up. And it's a sign of hope. Did you know that it comes out of the Bible? It comes out of the Old Testament in the Bible. And there's a mention here of a man's name, and the man's name was Noah. And in the Old Testament, this man named Noah, God spoke to him and said, Noah, I want you to build a really big ark. Now, Noah perhaps lived in an area like we do in the Black Country, and there are no big lakes, and it's not by the seaside. And Noah must have thought, why on earth is God asking me to build a big boat? But Noah actually trusted in God, and he followed God's instructions. And that ark, that big boat, was desperately needed because there was a flood. And the earth was flooded, and only the people in the ark were saved. And so we've used the rainbow because at the end of the flood, God put a rainbow in the sky as a promise, as a symbol of hope, that he would not flood the earth again, that he would not wipe things out. So even in this passage in the Old Testament, as I read it during lockdown, I thought about all those rainbows that people have got up in their windows as a symbol of hope. So I'll take you back now to verse 2. Sorry, we're jumping around a little bit, and I hope that you're following my train of thought. And this is the nudge from God, the challenge from God. It says, enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen the stakes. So, I know there are some people, and you can give me a wave if you've had the tent up in the back garden and you've had a sleep out. Yes, Zach, are you there? Give me a wave. I know. Oh, the Cowleys, they have as well. Brilliant. I know Casey and Oliver have done that. Is there anybody else? Yay. They're giving me a wave. If they're there in the background, give me a wave, boys. Yeah, that's it. You had a sleep out, didn't you? In the tent. So we go on, not me, you go on camping holidays, and you put up a tent, and it's a temporary structure, and it means that it can be moved around if you didn't like that campsite. The campsite was too small or too big, or the campsite was too quiet or too noisy, and you can up sticks and move somewhere else, or you can go away for a few days and then you pack it all down and you store it in the loft, maybe ready for another year. So I was thinking about that, and it says, enlarge the place of your tent, stretch your tent curtains wide, do not hold back. Now, I am also quite a fan of the Message, and in the Message it also uses this sort of tent analogy. But I was thinking about, it says about go out to the side. So I know John and Emma had an extension on their house, so I'm going to use that as a bit of an example. They went out to the side. They had a room built on the side. It made their house bigger, more usable space. And you have to have plans drawn up for that, and you have to employ a builder. I'm sure if you ask John and Em, that there was noise and there was mess, and it got a lot worse before it got better. So again, thinking about what is God nudging us to do and what is the challenge. Is God asking us to adapt, to change, to do something on a temporary basis, to be able to move it around, to adapt it, to fit it to these circumstances, this lockdown, and thinking about resetting and what the new normal will be. Go out to the side, make more space. Think outside the box, or if you're a skier, go off-piste. And thinking about doing things outside of the church building. So today is Pentecost, and we think about it as the birth of the church. But the church is not the building. The church are the people. You think about all the faces on here, we are the church. And although the church building is shut, the church is still very much alive. Now, when we first started using Zoom, and you see all the faces on here, God said to me, it's like heaven on earth. And it was that verse in the New Testament where God says, in my house are many rooms, or many mansions, if you think about an older translation. And I just thought that each thumbnail is a home represented, and God is in each of these places. He is in each of these homes, and it is bringing heaven to earth as we pray in the Lord's Prayer. So what is God nudging you towards? So it almost came full circle, because in verse 13, it says about being taught by the Lord. You will be taught by the Lord. Coming back to God being our teacher, back to being home schooled. What does he want to teach us? What does he want to teach you? What is he preparing us for? So we need to stop, to rest, and there will be a reset. So I'm going to hand back to Jason.
Thanks, Heidi. That was excellent. That was really thought-provoking and challenging on a number of levels. Tracy, I wonder if we could have some just a time of reflection, if that's okay. I'm just going to read out a section of Isaiah that Heidi read out.